Welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. You're joining me for the round 14 review. We are down to the last and final buy round. So we'll go through the team, where it's at, trades this final week, last few plans when it comes to upgrades. I think a lot of teams are now down to 10 or fewer trades. So really we've got the last 2 or 3 weeks of trading to go now. And then we'll be sailing on home and seeing, or hopefully we've picked good players to run home and things go okay. Apologies for this video coming a little bit late. Had family staying with us for the weekend, and with my setup I can't record videos with others around at night. It just doesn't work. It's a bit unfair to them, so got delayed until, what is it, Tuesday, which is good. I thought I was going to be recording this with a very sad expression with Butters, and I mean I was going to talk on the MRO anyway, because it seems they've eased things off. I'm surprised more didn't even really get cited. That was definitely weeks at the start of this year. It was weeks last year, so I'm not sure what's changed. And then Butters got a week, who I own pretty heavily. And I thought that was a week as well. And he's managed to get off at tribunal, I think, in the last half hour, which is pretty amazing. So I will take that. It's fortunate. I'm surprised he got off, but yeah, I think they've shifted again on how strict they are on some of the interpretation of these things and how hard they're going to punish them. So I guess benefit for our SuperCoach and fantasy sides, which is good for more and butter owners. If you were anti-potting them, you're probably a little bit disappointed, but it's just the way the game goes sometimes. All right, so yeah, let's crack in. I don't think there's a ton to discuss. Just because the strategies were all really played out this week. You don't want to trade in people that are on their buy, and if you're going to sideways people, you're trading off people that are not on their buy. It's pretty much as simple as that, and you're just trying to complete your team with best 22, or if you can get up to maybe a 23rd or 24th player to loop in. So we can talk about some of those options. But my team ended up with a 1970, pretty disappointing in the end. Not a great score, despite, I think, having a fair few available. So dropped just under 100 spots, still in the top 2K, which is okay. I mean, I think a top 1,000 finish would be amazing from here, but I don't really anticipate that'll happen with where my team's at. So, yeah. All right, so trades last week. Let's chat through those quickly. I brought in Sarong finally, and I knew he was going to lose money because he had 180 or something break even, but I was like, look, I got to trade him in. I've got to put players on the field. And in hindsight, I probably should have brought in LDU instead of Sarong. But hopefully Sarong will be better over the back half of the year. But yeah, finally got him, and he dropped a poor score, which is a bit frustrating. And then Gold Coast this week isn't the best matchup. So he came in, and I think Dowling came in. I was tossing up between Kruger and Dowling. Ended up going Dowling in the end, just because with the final rookie spots, having Kruger made this really awkward, just with like where I had people placed and opening up DPP. I've currently got none in the midfield, so I wanted to be able to access some. So, and then the other thing was, I thought there's a chance that if Strawn holds his spot, I might want him at R3, given that I don't have Luke Jackson. So it means going Kruger, it becomes super awkward because you then have Kruger and Livingston and Strawn as these three here. And I thought there's a pretty good chance I went Dowling at some point with Crouch out for the year. So anyway, so I went Dowling in the end. It went Sarong. I could not tell you which vaults I traded out. Probably Dempsey. I think he finally went, and someone else. Hugo Garcia went as well. So yeah, and then McKercher didn't play, which was disappointing. But I think that was really it. Otherwise, I had a fair few available and playing, but just didn't put a great score together. We had McAuliffe obviously starting as the sub, which was confusing and disappointing. We had actually, let me undo this because I don't know if I haven't made any trades yet, but I've fiddled around with the side. So yeah, that was pretty disappointing. And then like the other thing that let down was, even though I had extra players playing, a lot of them didn't put up very good scores. So 551, Baker 62. Expect better than both of those. They both got outdone by Frazier, and Fife got outdone by Dowling. Sullivan 54. So I had a lot of these guys that I just needed 1 or 2 good scores out of, and it didn't happen, and that cost me a fair bit in this week. And then yeah, the midfield was disappointing. I mean, I know a lot of these are quite popular, but when you have like LDU going 140, and that's pretty highly owned, being on some of these other guys obviously hurts a fair bit. All right, so we'll optimize. And then, McKercher hurts as well. That would have been a good one this week. So, oh, actually, I shouldn't have done optimize because we should actually review and talk through the players really quickly. But I mean, there's not a lot to talk about at this point, other than if you brought in Ryan this week, you'd be disappointed, just like myself with Sarong. Still should be, top 2 or 3 defender for the rest of the year. Paying 640 for him just feels wrong. But if it's your last trade, you're not really worrying about price. You're just getting in the players you think will be best on the run home. And I think Luke Ryan's still got to be up there in consideration. We've seen that the tag should go to Clark over him. And there was a moment in that game where he had 4 kick marks in under, I want to say 30 seconds. It was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. It probably was like most of his score for that round. I haven't watched George's video for the week yet, haven't had time, but just based on the title, I think that would be what he's been fuming about. He loves the top price trade in. But yeah, that was, he'll be fine from here. It's just like a frustrating week. Freo got smashed. They'll bounce back better than that. Dacos is good. Tagged for 3 quarters was okay, but not great. Wasn't tagged in 4th quarter and dominated that game and pulled the Pies over the line. Really impressive. His ability to like win a game when Collingwood start to get some run on. Like very enjoyable watch, especially owning him. I can't imagine how painful it'd be if you didn't. Still disappointed he started the year slow because I think like starting him more often than not works out, but that's fairly disappointing. With that said, he should be tagged from here on out. Like, I mean, everyone's got him, and if you don't have him, you probably still got to trade him on. But I think like we've seen taggers coming back. It's a really big theme at the moment, and he's got to be option 1A for most teams. There's no one else in the Pies to tag, and we've seen the game-winning ability for him, especially once Pies start to get on the move. He can, he's just so damaging. I think it must have been like 3 of the 4 goals or something like that the Pies kicked were all either because Dacos kicked them or like he entered the 50. That's just crazy. Yeah, just really good. Really good. Sheasel has continued on in this midfield role, much better than what we thought. So obviously there was a fair bit of concern with him moving from the easy defense role into the midfield, but it's very reminiscent of Dacos actually, where we were worried about Dacos doing the same, and Dacos finished last year very strong. Sheasel has done well so far. With that said, it is been 2 of the more competitive games for North for the year so far. Whether that can actually continue on once the game scripts kind of go more how we think they will, yet to be seen. But if he was in a winning side, if he was like playing in the Pies and he's the cherry on top, I actually think he could, be up there in a 110 average. So this is going to end up being a decent hold, much better than what I would have expected on average. Houston 174. This probably saved my week more than anything else, to be honest, because I know what Dale had a 140. There was another popular defender which I didn't have. Whitfield had I think is a similar score. So to have Houston come in and put together a 140, and I'm sorry, you can't actually see my side of my screen at the moment. That really helps a lot. And I was pretty disappointed with this pick. Like it's a bit like Sarong. Finally got on him, and then he started doing, I think, quite poor. I think maybe I had him for the 148. Can't remember now. But yeah, so to get a 170 was huge. He just very efficient kicking, and with Butters, Horn-Francis, Rosie, they're all getting attention over him, which really does free him up. This 114 average is much better than what I expected. And he's been much more consistent than what I would have expected this year. So prove me wrong. Can I say I see a defined role for him? Probably not, and that was like my biggest concern. But it does seem like there's less variance week to week. It's not like he's playing halfback and then wing and then midfield. It does seem to be more of that like halfback pushing up to the ball role. So maybe there is more consistency, and that's what's showing in his scoring as well. But yeah, pleasant own. Fisher, man, I wish he'd kicked that game winner. People have been hating on him so much this year. I think undeservedly so. He's won me over a bit this year, Fisher. Just as like someone I'm kind of rooting for as a bit of an underdog. I think unfairly hated on in SuperCoach and fantasy circles. But I've liked what he's done more often than not this year. So anyway, yeah, I'm happy to have him as a forward for the rest of the year. And then McKercher, please be back this week. This is reminiscent of Oliver last year for me. Just the worst hold. I've done it 2 years in a row. I've just held someone with an injury, like uncertain injury time frame. Actually, Oliver's I kind of projected correctly, and then he got re-injured, and that's what made it bad. And McKercher, yeah. I mean, there was always a risk it would be this long. I was aware that was an outcome. So I kind of need him back this week. But yep. Midfield, Bont's just bonning around. It's a bit like Dacos again, where he kind of has to be in consideration for vice captain or captain every week. From the fantasy side, you actually see like very big variance in his scoring week to week. Like he's had big ups, big downs. In SuperCoach, you get that evened out a little bit just because of his contested knock-ons and all that jazz. So I do worry about him a bit as a captain option, but you can't doubt the ceiling's still there, and I think he's close to being M1 again for this year, which is pretty hard to back that up. He was M1 last year, right? Or was he M1 last year? Over, I think he was, right? I don't know. I can't remember now. My memory's cooked. And there's actually an easy way to look this in players, but I'm not going to. Yeah, Sarong. I mean, I've got him. He should be top 8. It's just disappointing week. Butters. Yeah, the tag here is crazy, and then a hard matchup, so he's going to tank in price. I guess the question here is like, do you want him? Because he's dropped 3 kind of average scores in a row. And they've got a lot of games where potential tags are coming up. So Brisbane Lions here, that's a potential Berry tag. Is Berry the right type for Butters? I don't know, but like could go there. Saints, you've got Windhager. Dogs, I don't think have mucked around with a tag, but I might be mistaken. Gold Coast, I don't think have mucked around with a tag. Have they? Tigers have at points, but I'm not sure if they'd go for Butters. Carlton has been playing lots of tags, so yeah, Sincotta or something could go back to him, which he did in round 12 for his 98. James Jordan for the Swans could go to him. D's have been running a tagger as well, whose name escapes me. Crows have been running Max Michelini. So there are a lot of potential tags here on the run home for Butters. I do wonder whether they continue to go to him over Rosie and Horn Francis and even a Houston. There's a lot of potential tag targets, but it's been effective on Butters. So while it's working, I can see them going back to it. And if Port aren't winning, then I don't know why teams would mix up from that formula. So that is a little bit worrying as an owner. I'm not sure. It's actually hard to recommend jumping on him with the amount of taggers and the success they've had now. So if you want to go against him, like I get it, but he's getting to a pretty good price point. Goulden's been good in the 2 weeks that I've owned him. Like obviously his disposal efficiency was a little bit better. He'd be pumping out 130s each week, but it's just not. That's not who he is. So yeah, I mean his work rate, how much he gets involved is good. I'm a little bit disappointed with the time on ground because we were promised that 100%. That's what he was working towards, and it seems to have gone the other way. And that was really what was going to take that pick over the top. And you know why I'd lean towards him over someone like an LDU who is clearly looking better than what he was at the start of the year. I was a big proponent of LDU, had him over Green, and I mean that's now turned out to be correct. But you know, watching him at the start of the year, very hesitant, wasn't going in first to win the ball, just didn't look like himself, and a lot of that seems to have fixed up in the last month. I still own him in the other 2 formats I play, so still hoping that he does well. And yeah, definitely there's a noticeable change, but also without having the numbers in front of me, LDU's best games were in wins over the last couple of years. His average in wins was bigger than losses, very small sample size, like Lowell North, but that's effectively what he's played in. I mean, he didn't win last week, but that was close game scaling where they were competitive. So yeah, in those games, that's where he scored his best, and as we've seen. So it's a little bit like Sheasel. I'm hesitant on, is this what we actually see going forward? But I do think even if North don't continue this form, LDU's average will be better than what we saw over the first couple of months of the year. I think a little bit like Dacos, undisclosed injury, some type of niggle, and that's fixed up, and you're actually seeing more realistic version of what they're like, and it puts him on the list of potential starters for me again next year, especially if he gets through this season without injury, which was the other big knock on him. Then yeah, huge fan. I really do like LDU. Dawson, yeah, disappointing. He got a bit of attention in this game from memory, and so like once again, I'm gonna start looking at like what's their run home look like. But I do think Dawson will be fine and work through a lot of this stuff going forward. Yeah, that's right. He had Jordan following around. Green, 30 touches for an 80 is not what we like to see. Brutal. Yeah, brutal. This is a super frustrating owner hold now. Like, could you trade off him? Probably. Oh, he's got his 5 against the Swans coming up now, which is what the injury game from the start of the year. But he's now it's that was in round 8. If you look at these games, sorry, my big old heads in the way. But he's had a 116 on Essendon and then 95, 78, 79, 80. His 3-round average is 79. That is crazy bad. The fixture on the run home doesn't look amazing either. I actually see a lot of matchups in which mids don't score particularly well against Carlton, Gold Coast, Brisbane. I think the good news is he's probably not at risk of tag with Whitfield and Josh Kelly on that side. We're hoping Josh Kelly back would actually help his scoring, but we didn't see it this week. Even though he got 30 touches, which is a good number. Oh, we hope this turns around. But, I mean, this is the whole idea behind getting an M9. Someone like a Rosie would be good. I think his break-even's still quite high. It's a 130. So, yeah, as I said, Lions, harder matchup to score on. He's 419. So that's a, potential one that you get in as an M9. You play Green and Rosie at that spot. Sullivan was a bit quiet this game until the Pies got online in the third and fourth. I think he was particularly good for scoring in the fourth, but then sat on the bench the last minutes of that game when the last bit of scaling was on. But at least he hit his break even and it's gone up, 1K. He's ready to be moved on this week. And then McAuliffe, super disappointing. The problem with trading Garcia was when McAuliffe was sub, I couldn't move McAuliffe on because my trades were locked. And that means I lost 17K. As soon as the sub, I would have moved him on. Yeah, that's bad. In the rucks, English was good, but I mean, he beat up Darcy or Freo. Yeah, beat up Darcy or Freo earlier in the year. So it was kind of like a repeat of that. You went 134 of them last time, went 136 last time. I didn't think English looked particularly impressive or good, to be honest. Like, you had Grundy, who looked much better on the weekend, has looked much better over a period of time. Cherry, I think, looked better. So a bit nervous about holding English. I hope the buy, as well as like his contract negotiations, not going as well as he would have liked to be the motivator for the back half of the year, because getting a little bit nervous on that one. And then in the forward line, Heaney and Zorko both had 141. So yeah, Zorko went vice captain against the Saints matchup. He was on track for like a 200 or something at halftime and slowed down a fair bit, but a 140 still, a great, very respectable vice captain score. Looking at my team, what was really only Bont or Houston that would have done better. Would have never had it anywhere near Houston. And Bont, I'm not sure I would have trusted with the up and down nature. I mean, not being a massive believer of the Dogs as a side. Baker disappointing and a bit of a tricky sticky point for me this week, and it's a weird one. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's just a me and my team issue. I know he's super unique, but his CBA's definitely dropped off again with some of the players returning. They've got Hopper to come back, and with Tigers not necessarily doing particularly great, he's going to be very inconsistent in that role. If I can get him to a F7, then I can loop him between the back and the forward line, and that works. But a lot of the other forward options I'm looking at to complete my side are kind of speculative as well. So do I want to be benching a Baker for a Kerno each week? That type of thing is weighing on my mind. Or do I just move him on this week and cash him in? And when you're getting down to low on trades like this, that is a bit of a dicey proposition. But he is on his buy, and I think I've drawn about even on money. But going him over Moore has obviously been a blunder. And I know Moore didn't have a good weekend, but he's would have scored 150, 200 more points over the same period, at least, given that Baker missed 2 weeks with a bye. And Moore had that, 150 game or 170 or whatever it was, where he kicked 5 goals. Huge. So yeah, that's disappointing. Fife, the newspaper articles out during the week talking about how he's ready to release himself and attack the second half of the year. This is the side that he put, it was this 119 game, right? He had the 37 touches, near best on ground, farmed the Dogs early in the year. Yeah, this 119 game. And they didn't start him. I think they started him on the bench or something ridiculous like that. They parked him forward for tons of the game. Just crazy. He came off a good game against the D's too, and then they use him in that way. Very frustrating after all that positive stuff. So I think he barely hit his break even. His break even's still pretty low this week. But I was hoping for a ton last week and actually get him back up to 400k before moving on. Would really help facilitate getting Rankin once he's off his bye. So yeah, that's sad. Probably what'll happen is he'll actually score well this week, at 80 or 100. I don't even know what the matchup is, but he'll score well this week and then actually make it really difficult or hard for me to trade off. And then I probably won't, because forcing Rankin will be hard. And then what will happen is he'll drop a 40 the week after, and it'll be painful. So yeah, fun little roller coaster. I do like Fife a lot, but yeah, the last parts, I should have just jumped off earlier when he was capped out at 400 or whatever it was. Should have moved him on then. Fraser's been good. Out of all the rookies that are on bye this week, Sullivan, McAuliffe, Fraser, Dowling, Fraser's probably the one that I'd like to keep the most, just because I think there's more price rises to come, and I think his job security is okay. I think he's played his role, he's been asked to do pretty well. At the same point, he's the one that's, basically nearly top price as well and plays for Bevo. So if I have to move him on, sure. But yeah, that's probably the one I like the most. And then, yeah, Dowling, I mean, you're not going to move on Dowling because he still doesn't have the price rise. But if you haven't got him now and you need a rookie this week, you probably could, or you'd be looking to jump on him once he's off his bye and named again, which he should do, I think. I think you've got some other Crows players that could probably be dropped ahead of him just with where they're at the moment. And then, yeah, very disappointing. Like, I mean, I was meant to have more players this week with both McKercher and Dawson, and it just doesn't work out like that, unfortunately. All right, so we'll hit the optimize button. And actually, what we'll do is we'll try and set up the team just to get a view for what it looks like. And I think this is a nice little thing to go through if you haven't done yet. I'm sure a lot of people have. Is we should be getting close to finishing our sides now. So even if you've got players on the buy or whatever, chuck them on field and just have a look at what your completed team kind of looks like. So for me, I think I'm probably happy with those first 5 defenders. McKercher at D6, probably not ideal, but it depends on how he looks when he comes back. There's a few players I'm missing in here, which I don't mind owning. Whitfield's up and down, but like I still like him. I think if you had Clark from Freo or even traded him in, like, you obviously disappointing week, but I don't mind it. If you're still looking for an upgrade, I don't mind Holmes as a pod. I think he's built nicely into the year, and as Stewart struggles, he seems to have done better. Or you could even look at Ridley. I think there's some few interesting pod options if you've still got to finish your defense. Young isn't a bad option either by any means as well. Otherwise, I think apart from McKercher, the other cheap one you could probably look at is Sard, who is like 410k now. I think I've mentioned him a couple of times, but he had that injury game and of a 26, and then returned with a 63, but has put together a 91 and 100 in the last 2 games. I think you probably get a 95 to 105 average from here to the end of the year. Some nice matchups too in the Carlton fixture as well. Carlton's fixture is very soft, which we'll talk about in a bit when we get to the forwards. But yeah, Geelong, Richmond, GWS, Dogs, North, Port, Collingwood, Hawks, West Coast Saints. Really not a whole lot to be excited or worried about there. I think GWS is currently 5th on the ladder. Port's in the top 8, I think. I think that's about it. Oh, Geelong might still be in the top 8 too. Oh, and Pies are obviously up there. But yeah, there's a lot of teams there that even if they are in the top 8, they're not necessarily hard matchups for defenders. So I think he's definitely one you can keep an eye on as well. Having a look in the midfield, so a couple of things here. So I think not owning LDU is not great. He looks quite good. Otherwise, yeah, Green at M8 is probably the biggest concern. I don't think Rao's been particularly good, but I have a feeling the bye will help him. And then Butters, I'm concerned for fixture reasons. The rest of that midfield, I'm pretty content with. Other players you could be looking at, Laird is probably the interesting one. Obviously on bye this week, but he played more halfback. I think he only had like low 20 CBAs. And now I don't know if that's because they're happy with that role and they're going to keep him there, or just because they're moving things around for Max Michelini to tag. So yeah, like that's a interesting one as a defender option that's probably cheap. Rose, you've already mentioned as a cheap option as well. I think if you're looking at like players to loop, someone like Anderson makes a lot of sense, where he's very high variance player. His highs and lows are huge. He's 550k, so reasonably priced, but when he scores big, he's had 4 scores of like 150 plus this year, and then his bad scores like 50s, 70s, 55s. So a perfect player to loophole as an M9 if you can jump onto him. Otherwise, the other one I'm a little bit concerned about is Walsh. I think it's a really hard spot because I'm still worried about his back and whether it lasts, but Carlton's fixture, very nice. So yeah, that's probably another one that I'd like consider. Treloar maybe as well. He's obviously had a good season and is unique. I think that's probably the other one. I don't know, if Libba being back is going to affect him. Just quickly have a look at the mids here. Is there anyone obvious that I'm missing? Yeah, Treloar's in the top 8. Steele, I'm not a believer on. Yeah, Laird could be interesting. Dunkley and Neil, yeah, possibly. LDU I like. Warner I don't. Miller, not interested. Oh, and then I obviously traded out Oliver a couple of weeks ago. With no Petrarca out, is there upside there? I'm not sure there is. Like, I don't think that was what was holding Oliver back. If anything, it may give more attention or create moves in the midfield. I didn't mention Salem in defense, but I think he's still reasonably cheap as well. You could consider he might get more on ball time if that's appealing to you. So yeah, I think those are some of the mid options for the rucks here. Like I like Gorn. R2 is still a bit of a mess. So Marshall had Campbell play on the weekend, and that affected his ruck split pretty badly. Cherry had Teakle come in and play, but Teakle only took about 15% of ruck contests, which is about average for Cherry, so it didn't really seem to affect him too much. But Teakle played all right, so I could imagine him holding. Maybe they then toy with more ruck split time, especially if Cherry has weeks where he's sore, so that could be a negative. And English has Darcy to come back, who has been affecting him by the looks of things. They've been splitting more ruck time. If they're running all of English, Lob, and Darcy at once, that's obviously a bit scary. And Lob played well, so I could imagine them actually doing that post-bye. But I'm not sure. Oh, and then Grundy's been good. Grundy's been good. It's like no way to get around it. I'm not sure I like any of these options enough or dislike any of these options enough to jump off them. I think you just want to make sure that you have gone and then pick whichever one of these you like. But if you've got English, I probably wouldn't go to Grundy or Marshall unless you're really sure that there's going to be big swings going one way or the other. The only one that is really interesting to me is Tom de Koning, who's found a lot of form with Pitnet out of the side. Shout out to Sal from the Discord, who jumped on early and were like, yes, love that move for a few week play. And he's gone, 131, 140, 146. So 3 massive scores in that period of time without Pitto. So if Voss came out this week and was like, do you know what? We're done with dual rock. We're just going to play TDK, solo rock, rest of year. This is probably the one I actually could see myself jumping off an English or someone for, just because there's a little bit of cash involved. There's some upside. It's a little bit unique. And once again, Carlton's run home is pretty good. I feel like I'm going to have to start putting money into a swear jar if I repeat that again, but we're going to one more time. So that's probably the only like left field one. I probably wouldn't look at like Darcy or anyone else like that. That's probably just like English, Marshall, Cherry, Grundy, or potentially Tom de Koning. And honestly, with Campbell in and playing all right, I'm probably not looking at Marshall. If Campbell holds in particular, and with Teakle in and playing all right, I'm probably not looking at Cherry. So really, it comes down to English and Grundy. If you have English, I wouldn't go to Grundy. If I had to pick one from scratch, I mean, you'd probably be silly not to go with Grundy, just with the form he's in, and English having the bye this week. All right, and then in the forward line, so I think there's maybe 5 forwards I'm confident in being top 5 forwards, or at least like I'm comfortable enough owning them. So those are Flanders, Heaney, Zorko, Rankin, and then Fisher. F6 is hard, and that's where you want an F7 as well. You've got lots of players: Moore, Luke Jackson, Kerno. This is where we're going to start getting a little bit adventurous here for what like those F7 options could be. And once again, I think if you're starting to look for a player you can loop, there's 2 ways to go about it. You either look for someone that's very functional, someone like a Jackson that can cover your rucks as well as your forwards, or you can look for someone that is like potentially going to offer more points, and that is like high variance, and that could be a key position player, for example. Just a reminder though, if you're forced to field them 1 week because one of your other 22 is injured, you don't get the luxury of looping them off. You could be taking one of their down week scores. So that's something to weigh up as part of the fit. It's just as much about cover as it is getting an extra player to loop with. Jackson, Moore, I think Caldwell is obviously an interesting one. Do some of the returning Essendon players affect him? Potentially. Kerno from a ruck perspective, and potentially Mackay, but I like Kerno more of the 2. Myers has had some down games, but some of the cats should be returning now in terms of Danger, Guthrie. Whether they stay fit for the year is another question again, but there's potentially some upside at his price. And then you've got Bolton as well, who we haven't seen the best of this year at 420k. All interesting options. Powell's not it, especially with Phillips in the side. Cameron had some decent form in some of his games, playing more up into the wing, but I'm not sure I'm actually looking there. And then beyond that, it's pretty dire if we're being honest. So yeah, and like Baker, don't touch Baker. Let's not even look. That's sore spot. Okay. And then just quickly on rookies. So there's not a whole lot, at least I'm aware of, that we could be looking forward to this week. Sard was the interesting one from the Essendon camp, but Syndesmos is out 6 to 8, so probably not an option. You could go for like a Dowling or a Schoenmaker who could hold, or should hold, I would say, as like a downgrade option for potential cover that may exist once they come back from bye. But the other option I think is just to go for loopholes now. So looking for your 102k players that provide some type of flexibility across spots. That play more Sunday games so you can leave them late. So I think it's players from West Coast Tigers. They're the ones that tend to have been fixtured late. Essendon not necessarily as good. I think they've got more of those Friday night games. So that might be like a Gray who's got defender forward DPP status. I'm pretty sure Campbell Gray, is that right? Yep, Campbell Gray, defender forward 102.4. You could look at someone like Assad who's got the defender mid status for 102k. But yeah, I think like that's, so you're either basically looking for a player that isn't on the bubble but might give you cover off the buys, and I think like Schoenmaker is probably the best looking defender option. You got Dowling. There's talk that Caulfield could be back soon, so you could always go like a Caulfield as well if like you want someone to provide you cover. But I'm in a bit of a tricky spot because I've got Reed here already and I want to move Dawson back and forth. So I can't go Schoenmakers, even though I think he's going to be a great option. Make a fair bit of money, would be good cover, but it kills any DPP potential for me. Yes, I'm not actually sure who I'm going to pick. I might just be looking for any debutant this week that gets a game. Oh, the other one as well, who I actually don't mind as an option, but I'm not sure about the job security, is Carl Warner. So he's got a 78. This 63 that he scored in game one was, I want to say, in the first half, two and a bit quarters, and then he was concussed. So his scoring's actually been very good in that defense line. 134k, a bit more expensive, but if you need someone to play this week, then I don't hate Warner if he gets another game. But yeah, just be mindful that his job security isn't the best. He came into as a late change for Chapman, who had hamstring tightness. So keep an eye on the injury list just to see how long Chapman's out for. I think it's probably only 2 to 3. So great scoring potential, but it's only potential short term, and then you don't really have any cover. Someone like Schoenmakers is probably better, but doesn't give you as many spots this week. And then just quickly, actually, on this week, if you are going to end up with like 18 rather than 19, or even 17 rather than 18, at this point, I wouldn't force trades just to get up the extra number. It will backfire. Bring in some of these rookies. They don't tend to score that well anyway. You bring in someone on their sub and you get 10 points for a trade. It's not worth it. So just worry probably more about finishing your best side. And if it means losing 50 points this week, but you gain 100 over the back half of the year, be comfortable with it. All right, just take the short-term hit for the long-term success over the back half of the year, especially if you're in some leagues and you want to win those, right? Don't worry about this bye week. Worry about winning those. Yeah, most of us are out of contention for 50k now, so make sure you win your cashies and all that stuff. All right, so trade to me this week. Going back to my side and what I was trying to do before, which was just show how everyone's actually positioned on field. We're going to go through this process again because I scuffed it. Sorry. Bit all over the shop. So going back to how the team actually looks at the moment and where are my gaps, where are my weaknesses. So I don't like my M8. I would like to have Rosie as an M9. That'd be great. D6 McKerch is pretty sketchy. So getting like Assad as a cheap option or a better primo would be nice here. But I want one more week of McKerch at least, get another 50k out of him, help facilitate some of this stuff. Rux I'm not going to touch, and then the forward line, Rankin is the big one here that I really need, and that is tricky because he's priced at 570 now. But yeah, he's the one that I've got to get off the buy. That's part of why Fife was hanging around and actually was hoping he'd make a little bit more money than what he has to help facilitate that trade. So in terms of forward options, I think the one that I like most is potentially an F7 is Curnow. So 450k, but this is getting pretty tricky. I've got 9 trades left. I've got to get Curnow, Rankin, which is probably at least 4 trades, maybe 5. It takes me down to 4. And then I want to get McKercher up or get Rosie into midfield. That's going to take me down to very few trades at all. And I probably still want to have an injury trade or two, because if you lose a Bont, you don't want to bring on your 23rd. You actually want to sideways Bont out to someone better. We saw it last year with Dacos, where people couldn't necessarily trade out Dacos and just had to hold on to him for the back end of the year or use their 23rd cover. And the 23rd cover is okay, but when Dacos has that much money in his head, you just rather sideways him to someone good. Would I rather have Baker covering Dacos or Bont for the end of the year, or sideways them to LDU or Ridley or something, right? That's a bit of a no-brainer. But I think Kerno in this week is probably the play. Have I mentioned that Blues have a good run home? Has anyone mentioned the fixture? Okay, so ways to facilitate this. I think Sullivan out is obviously a key one for me. And then ideally it'd be McAuliffe out. But the problem is, you can already see, like just doing the quick math here, that's 530 available for me. Kerno's like 450. That is not going to work. I need more money than McAuliffe. So that would have to be then Fraser out, which is not the one that I want to trade, but it's probably the one that I'll have to if I'm going to get these trades done this week. And so we'd be bringing in Charlie Curnow, and I would take any 102k cheap rookie that is playing this week. If I cannot, if none put their hand up, who am I going to jump onto? It could be Locke Rawlinson. Mid forward DPP is handy, and the West Coast do have later fixtures. I've already got Livingston, so like 2 loopholes from the same game may not be the best. I could look at a Campbell Brown, but as I said, I'm starting to get a little bit blocked up in that spot and actually want to open up DPP to other lines. The other DPP with McKerch that would be potentially interesting to open up is defender mid, but I think with the Will Dawson DPP, there's actually ways I can work around that, although not while he's in defense. So anyway, that's one to consider for me. Let's just put in like Locke Rawlinson now as a placeholder. If we do get someone that's 102k and playing, I might jump on them. But only if I think they've got good job security or they've got DPP anyway that's handy. So for example, someone like Will Parker, if he comes back and plays this game, even though he's on the bubble with defender only, this is bad for me. I'm not going to take any of these types. So really it would have to be both cheap and have a DPP that's handy to me if they're playing. But yeah, it looks like this. Now, other option for me could be potentially to move on Baker just because like not loving this. And it could be something like bringing in Sard as the D6, and then have McKercher effectively cover like defense and midfield as an option. So let's not do that for now, because I think I do value the trade, and while Sard is probably an upgrade on Baker, I'm not sure if it's enough, especially with the forward line being weak for me to want to do that. So that puts me at this spot where I've got Rankin required here, Rosie ideally, and another defender, a better defender ideal, but I've only got 7 trades left. So having some of these guys not come on as cash gen late has been an absolute killer, to be honest. But not much you can do about that. Especially now, it's too late. Die's being cast. And so then the question is, how do I get to Rankin next week? Because if he's 570... I need another 102 for a rookie, so I'm going to need 600 and something to make that happen. How do I actually get there? With 2 trades as well, that's rough, because it's effectively it'd be 5 plus McKercher, I think, would be how I do it. Which is then not great. Baker would have to go back in defense, or Fisher would, and I'd be playing Rankin here, Kerno, F6 locked for the rest of the year. Dowling's cover. But I think the other thing that's tricky for me is I actually have to make a trade this week to field enough players. So if I have a look here, I've got 6 in defense, assuming McKercher plays. Actually, no, I don't. I've got 5 at the moment. 5 in defense, assuming McKercher plays. I've got 7 in the midfield with Clark, assuming Clark plays, which is a big if. So we've got 12, 13 with Gawn, and then we've got 6 in the forward line. So that's 19 that I'm getting to. And that's assuming McKercher and Clark play. Bit sketchy. So if... I mean, this is almost going to go against my own advice, but if Clark doesn't get up, for example, I'm going down to 18, or if Clark and McKercher in particular both don't get up, and I'm going down to 17, that is where I could see myself potentially pulling the trigger on like Baker to Sard this week, just given that Sard probably then has to sit there, and then the week after I can go like McKercher and Fife up to Rankin and a rookie, and that would complete the side. I won't get to a 23rd, which is pretty disappointing. but it's not looking good for me at the moment. Jen has not gone my way when it's come to some of these rooks. Not having Sexton's, I think, a really big killer for me in the back end, where people have made... effectively, I traded in McCurch the same week. I think some people traded in Sexton, which looks good for me for exactly 1 week until McCurch was injured. Sexton's up at 406k and made 220k in that time. McCurch had, one price rise and then was injured this whole time. So Sexton got lots of points and McCurch I've had to hold painfully. Would be ideal if he came back and was a proper primo D6 for me for the back end of the year, but I don't think I'll get that. Because that would be great. If he was actually D6, proper D6 quality material, I could just hold him at this spot, not have to worry about upgrading. What did we see out of Sheasel back end of last year? About 100. If I could get 100 out of him at that spot, I'd be very content. That's all I think Sard would do. And that's who I'm tossing up trading to. I think this is the team coming into this week. If McCurcher goes well, actually, I could see myself even doing something like Baker and Fife next week to Rankin and someone and just leaving McCurcher there. So we'll see. But yeah, Kerno is going to probably most likely be the trade for me this week. 89 average. Carlton are looking to hit their straps, and the run home is good. We like it. We like it a lot. So that'll be me. Finally, vice captain. I actually think it's a pretty tricky week. So if you've got Walsh, I like him as a vice captaincy option against the Cats, just given that they have been giving it points in midfield. They do have people returning, coming off bye. So, maybe a little bit better, but I think that's a decent one. Outside of that, I really struggle to see what I like this week. LDU against the Ds could be interesting with no Petrarca, but I think from my side, I'm probably looking at someone more like Gorn. If you've got Grundy against Briggs, I think that's a pretty nice matchup. And I think they already played once this year, did they? Did they already play once this year? They must have. And I think Grundy did well in that game from memory. But I don't know, don't test me on that. Yeah, they did. They played in round 8, of course. That's right. We were talking about the Tom Green injury. So, go check that out. But yeah, I think Grundy's probably the other one. For me, though, there's not a ton that I like here. Houston, I wouldn't touch. Ryan against Gold Coast, I'm probably not interested in, even though it's at Optus. So really, I think I've got Gorn, and then I think I've got Merritt as captain. But North have run the tag on him with Shield in the past. And I think he kicked 3 goals against them earlier in the year to help win, so it would make sense for them to send some attention. Am I thinking about the right game? I might not be. But yeah, I think that's where I'm looking at the moment. So Gorn into Merritt as my options. Otherwise, I could see myself like risking a Kerno into Gorn. The Swans, I don't know, did Heaney have a good game against GWS? Maybe that's one I look to, but he was in better form then. I don't think I'd go Goulden against them. Nope, he did not have a good game against GWS. 110 is not great by his standards this year. Sarong I don't trust after last week, but could be good against Gold Coast. Could Flanders be decent? I don't know, probably not enough that I'd captain. Yeah, it's a tough week for me. Tough week for me for sure. So it's probably looking like Gorn into Merritt, but with this situation where I think there's a likelihood that Merritt could get tagged, and I don't really like any of my options, my threshold for what captaincy score I take is a lot lower, especially if some of these other players that I've talked about that, are probably going to be popular vice captains don't go very well. But I could see myself taking a 110 plus this week from Gorn and just being content with that. Really don't like my options this week. All right, so that's me. Thanks for tuning in as always. And once again, apologies for late video. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.